Another issue that pertains to this is the immigration question. And I did want to ask you how you think that feeds into the way in which you want to talk about this issue, because an attitude that many decent Brits will have, as you say, a lot of Brits will not feel that the country is, that there is a population problem. In fact, they will feel that things are overcrowded. They can't get on the bus. They have to wait ages for a GP's appointment. All the problems that listeners will be familiar with. And they will often say this is a problem caused by immigration, the great movements of people that we've seen in the world over the past 10 or 20 years. And then, of course, another aspect of this discussion is that you will often hear from the left that we need lots and lots of migrants to come into the UK precisely because we haven't got as many young people as we would like to have, or we've got an aging population. I mean, Zach Polanski of the Green Party infamously said on Question Time, who's going to wipe our bums? That's essentially what he was saying. If we don't have these migrants coming in, who will look after us when we get old? How do you see that discussion? How useful is the immigration mirror in terms of understanding some of these problems?
Well, what I learned on my travels is there's a very dark side to migration I hadn't even been thinking about. I'll come to that in a moment. Just to cover, first of all, I don't take a view personally on whether immigration is a good thing or a bad thing for a given country. I do research, I give talks, I meet policymakers around the world, and some nations are pro-immigration and others are not. Japan's not pro-immigration, nor South Korea, nor Hungary, for example. I believe it's up to every nation to make its own decision on that. But if you think that migration is a solution to the birth rate crisis, I will absolutely tell you you're wrong. They're two separate issues. And there's a crossover. And again, with a blinker view, if we just look at the crossover, which is, yes, we need more workers for the NHS. And I had a relative in hospital in the UK recently, and it was wonderful to see, medical staff from around the world there. And without them, I can't imagine what, it would have been like for my relative. So no question. But the dark side is if you go to the countries where these people are from, and you see these hollowed out communities of not just the bright people leaving, not just brain drain, but often brawn drain as well to go and work overseas. And then you talk to younger people there, and then you talk to young people there who are saying quite simply their dream for the future is what? If you go to these countries where doctors come from, where workers come from, and you find these hollowed out communities, and the young people there, well, they've got a dream to leave. We have just sapped the future out of community after community after community. And, I went to Nepal and, went to talk to the head of demographics, professor at the largest university in Kathmandu. And all he wanted to talk about is, when are the people going to start coming back? And what are the old parents doing? Sure, they're being sent what are called remittances back. People, oh, that's great. Money. Old people don't want money as much as company and care. And again, I filmed this. I filmed old people, and sitting in the Himalayas, just miserable. And then two young women in Ethiopia, aged 26 approximately, and they were single, which to me I thought was quite unusual. And sub-Saharan Africa, I assumed people would be getting married at a younger age still. And, why hadn't they married? Well, they wanted to marry in Italy. So they're putting their lives on hold in the chance to come to Italy because of the dreams we've given them. So we're basically devastated. Zach Polanski, I don't know him personally or much about him, but a comment like that without putting your hand up and saying, actually, if I'm pro-migration at these levels to replace birth rates, to replace jobs, I'm at the same time saying I don't care about their home communities. And that's wrong to me, very wrong. But just most of us haven't thought of it this way. Now, the numbers are something else we need to look at here, because if you get over the morals, let's say, of taking people from their home communities, you still have a problem of migration. Well, you see, countries like Japan with low immigration have, soon will have a shrinking number of older people. Why they didn't bring immigrants? So the total number of older people in Japan will shrink. So as the country shrinks, not uniform, but they can see an end to the 2 million plus, people of every single age group, that they currently have. The number of births in Japan is around 700,000 now, and the whole country will not in an elegant way, but it will nonetheless settle. But if you're using migration to replace birth rates, of course, migrants need to be taken care of when they get elderly. They need social services. They need all of the things. So basically, the number of older people will not reduce. And that's what's happening in Europe. Basically, we're bringing people in who will get older. And so what do you then do? Well, you need more migrants. And then what do you then do? So when people are saying migration is a solution to low birth rates, what they really mean is perpetual, never-ending migration is the solution. And then you go back to what I just said about a little earlier about India. Birth rates already below 2, and in Bangladesh and Nepal. And sub-Saharan Africa on the same path. Where are these people going to come from? So at best, it's a very short-sighted strategy. And again, we need to make fully formed decisions. And in this area, I'm not even sure policymakers would be fully informed about the rapid shifts that are going on. Certainly, most people are unaware that migration is at best a short-term fix, ignoring the consequences for their homelands.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And this treatment of the global south, almost like a finishing school for servants who can come over here and serve us our coffee or look after us when we get old. There's something so kind of disdainful about that in terms of how it views those nations themselves. I think I've always found that quite an ugly approach to those nations. I did want to ask you about, I guess, a bit of a more philosophical question, which is, again, just going back to the cause of some of these problems of halving birth rates and the birth gap problem. You talk about the huge changes we've seen in society over the past few decades in terms of choice and autonomy. Do you think there's a cultural contribution as well? I guess what I mean by that is it possible that there's a kind of civilizational problem here as well, where, if you live in a culture that is not particularly confident, not particularly proud of itself, not particularly proud of its history, that could have a drip down effect of, I guess, discouraging the idea that you have a responsibility to replenish that civilization or to contribute to it in terms of creating new life. Beyond the kind of increase in choice, is there a kind of civilizational dynamic to this reluctance, I guess, or to, I guess, to the problem of unplanned childlessness, as you call it? Is there a civilizational factor too?
I think a lot of the issues we're seeing in societies, and there are many, particularly the younger people, are actually consequences of the re-engineering of our societies to deprioritize parenthood. And I'll cover that in a moment. I just want to cover first the concept of choice. Choice is a good thing. And I did mention before that, the choice is really not well understood at the moment in terms of there's a fertility window, so it needs to be fully informed. But there's another key point here as well when it comes with becoming a parent. Even fully informed, you can make a choice today. Most nations, you can make a choice not to become a parent. That's a choice, we have. You don't get to make a choice to become a parent. No one does. You get to make the choice to want to be a parent, to hope to be a parent, to intend to be a parent. But to become a parent requires certain other things. A partner, usually, and that's uncertain. And biology. And certain other things as well, having some form of roof over our heads and some, stable income, etc., etc. So the idea that autonomy, even touches that second part of this, I guess it's a coin, you choose not to, but the other side is actually, like a lottery. So, you either play the lottery, and most people succeed at that, but increasing numbers we heard don't. So in that context, I think back to the civilizational thing, and sharing some more numbers with you if I can. There's a number of common trends that have happened: Japan, Korea, Italy. In fact, all of them share mothers having around the same number of children as decades ago, increases in childlessness, often linked to periods of vulnerability, like the mortgage crisis in 08-09 affected many countries. The oil shock in the early 70s affected the UK, started to see people doing what? What do those vulnerabilities cause? Delayed parenthood. People start having children a little bit later. And in the case of Japan, one of the case studies that I've written in my research is at the time of the oil shock, if you already had a child, you went on to have 2, 3, 4 children, just like, the generation or the peers above you, if you like. Now, one thing changed. Those people who had not yet started a family, vulnerable times, what did they do? Delayed starting that family. What do you do when you delay as a young person back in the 70s, having a child? Well, you start working if you're a woman, or you work a bit longer before starting a family as a man, or you get better education. And if you map this back to the 70s, US too, when this delaying of parenthood started to creep in, people started to study longer, people started to work longer and have a child later. And often that was fine, because if you're delaying having a child at age 21, you're probably still going to be able to have a child 24, 25. The relationship may be different. Not everybody will, but you can see this in the data, just waves of people delaying parenthood. We're now in a position where the average age of motherhood is around 30 in most nations, 32 in others. We're no longer in a position where people can delay and expect to become parents. You're at it's the last chance already in terms of biology and all the other factors that need to come together. Now, your question was really about culture. Have other cultural things really crept in? Well, what do you do today if the average age of starting a family is 30 and you're 18 in high school and quite like one of your classmates? You're probably not thinking they're the person you're going to settle down and have a family with. I don't know when, probably at college age too. It's probably mid-late 20s before you start to take maybe relationships seriously. And even if you wanted to take it seriously, you might get a different reaction from your love interest, who's going to tell you you're mad even to talk about children at those ages. We've created these societies where the normative state is to do other things, not even think about children until late 20s at least. And I think in that context, then for sure, civilizations have changed, cultures have changed, and maybe some of those things are good, but I'm not seeing many of those.